Along with rivers, lakes become portals to the other world. Home to fantastic creatures, they are also dangerous places where the unwary can find themselves caught out. Much of the lake folklore involves bottomless pools, mermaids, vengeful maidens, or, of course, the Loch Ness Monster. So let's go and explore some of these tales in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host Icy Sedgwick. We are continuing with our watery theme for this particular month. I'm not quite sure why I picked water in March because it hasn't actually been particularly wet here. But anyway, never mind. That is what we're doing. I'm thinking I might actually switch over to poisonous plant folklore for April. So if you're interested in that, please do drop me a line and let me know. If you do have any other requests, obviously, again, drop me a line and let me know. I'm quite happy to accommodate requests within reason, obviously. Anyway, we're going to continue because I don't really like it when the introductions go on too long because I kind of figure you hate to hear the folklore, not me rambling on. So we're going to continue with our water folklore. So we did rivers last week and we did kelpies the week before. So this week we are obviously looking at lakes as well. Now perhaps the most famous slice of lake folklore is probably the Lady of the Lake in Arthurian legend. So much so that when an 8-year-old girl pulled a sword from Videstern Lake, the internet dubbed her the new Queen of Sweden. Now obviously the Lady of the Lake of Arthurian legend aside, lakes do pop up in a range of tales, and they do have more tangible links with belief systems of the past because archaeologists still find valuable objects like swords in lakes once held sacred by the Celtic people. Now obviously we can't know exactly what our ancestors were thinking, but the common assumption is that these expensive items became gifts for the gods. So we are going to start off with some Slavic mythology, and we're going to start off with the Rusalka. Now she has a range of origin stories, as most folkloric entities do, and noted folklorist Vladimir Prop noticed that the Rusalka had benevolent origins before the 19th century. So these figures emerged from water bodies like lakes during the spring, and they would actually help nurture the crops by watering them as they passed. And women might hang all kinds of offerings, including scarves and linen, on trees to appease them. But by the 19th century, the Rusalka had become a dangerous being, and you do tend to notice in quite a lot of folklore that things do change in the 19th century. And I'm not necessarily saying that we should blame the Victorians, but you know, it's the 19th century, so I'll let that one just hang and you can make of that what you will. I am going to look into that a little bit more, but it does seem strange that a lot of things change in the 19th century. But anyway, before I digress too far. By the 19th century, the Rusalka had, as I say, become a dangerous being, and they were more like ghosts than creatures like the Kelpies, and people believed that Rusalki were actually either young women who'd committed suicide or those who'd been murdered by drowning, the Rusalki being the plural form of Rusalka. Now, in both of these cases, runaway bridegrooms, abusive husbands or feckless lovers were often the cause of the watery suicide or murder, and the law doomed the women to live out their days as Rusalki until the point when they would have naturally died had they actually lived. Which also isn't a million miles away from one of the potential origin myths for the Ben Nia in Scottish folklore. But either way, another widespread belief actually casts the Rusalki as the souls of unbaptised or stillborn babies as well as drowned women. So in either way, these beings continue to haunt lakes and waterways. Now, most tales did paint the Rusalki as not being inherently malevolent. So if somebody actually avenged her death, she would then die in peace. If not, however, they would then lure young men into the water where they would drown them. And in this guise, the Rusalka bears a remarkable resemblance to both Lorelei of the Rhine, who were met last week, and some incarnations of Jenny Greenteeth. Now, Linda J. Ivanitz describes the Rusalki as the Russian counterpart to sirens, naiads and other Greek forest spirits, but there were differences between northern Russia and southern Russia, because in the south the Rusalki boasted youth and beauty, and in the north, and I quote, the figure tended to be older and unattractive with unnaturally large breasts and long dishevelled hair as its prominent features, end quote. So according to Ivanites, the Rusalka might take her peasant lover to her palace beneath the water, but alternatively peasants would baptise Rusalki to turn them into humans and then marry them. And this one kind of reminds me a little bit of Selkie folklore, where the creature is forced into marriage to humans through the theft of their skins. So it does seem a little bit strange that you would find a Rusalki and then baptise them so that you could turn them back into humans purely to marry them. Like, this doesn't seem like the Rusalka's getting a particularly good deal in either way that you look at it, really. Now, you could actually protect yourself from the Rusalki with, and I quote, the sign of the cross, a magic circle, incense, garlic, wormwood, a pin or poke, and certain verbal charms, end quote, and that comes from Ivanites as well. I would obviously say that if you avoided strange women who sang to you from lakes, that would probably be quite a good option as well. Now, I did mention that there were some links between the Rusalka and Jenny Greenteeth, and we did obviously mention Jenny Greenteeth as well as the Grindylows last week when we had a look at rivers. But she does also appear in lake folklore as well, so it's quite interesting to see how she differs from the Rusalka in British lake folklore. And she does appear in folklore for quite a few isolated ponds, such as the pond near Truey Common, but also in Doxy Pool as well. Now, for some people, Jenny Greenteeth actually refers not to the figure, but to the weeds covering the surface of the water, and these would quite certainly pull you to your death if you got tangled in them. So, quite frankly, avoiding them is just common sense. And obviously, coming up with some kind of demonic name for them, again, shows us the cautionary tale aspect of lake folklore. But on the other hand, some people do think that Jenny is a malicious witch who lurks below the weeds, ready to strike at anyone who enters her waters. Again, cautionary tale stops people going into water where they might get into trouble. Now, I did mention Doxy Pool, and you will find this on the Roaches, which is an escarpment near the border between Derbyshire and Staffordshire. Now, I should point out that it's only 49 by 33 feet, so it's not exactly huge, and sub-legends do actually claim that the pond is bottomless. Other people say that an underground passage links it to the nearby Blake Mere, and the lake folklore around these two pools says that its inhabitant travels between the two at particular times of the year. The inhabitant does vary sometimes depending on the story, but its most famous story concerns Jenny Greenteeth, and while many Jenny stories call her a witch, the Doxy Pool variety actually describes her as a mermaid. Now, obviously, we would be more inclined to think of mermaids along with the sea, but apparently there are some freshwater versions as well. And a 1949 report did describe a strange creature climbing out of the water who was believed to be Jenny. Now, one origin story claims that a sailor brought the mermaid to the pool after he fell in love with her on a voyage. Now, obviously he died, but she, being immortal, didn't. And she grew quite lonely and bitter because she couldn't return to the sea, which quite frankly seems like a fairly fair reaction to the situation, but there we go. But in this version of lake folklore, she actually haunts the lake to lure the unwary to their deaths. It doesn't exactly explain why, although you do wonder, is it because she's lonely and she wants company, or is it that she wants revenge? Who knows? Another story does describe Jenny Greenteeth as being a local girl who had spurned the attention of a local man. So rather than just accepting that no means no, he decided instead to accuse her of witchcraft to get his own back on her. And she was then drowned in Blake Mere Pool as punishment. And she cursed him with her dying breath, and 3 days later his dead body also turned up beside the pool. And if you believe that particular lake folklore, no birds fly over Blake Mere, and it's believed to be because of the presence of Jenny Greenteeth. Now, the previous story, the one about the sailor, does link Jenny Greenteeth with the mermaid, and as I say, we normally associate the mermaid with the sea. But according to Reader's Digest, mermaids could also be guardian spirits of inland waters, and in this particular guise, they then kept an eye on the actions of humans, and let's be honest, humans probably do actually need that kind of watchful eye a lot of the time. So in one tale, people decided to dredge Aqualate Mere in Staffordshire in the 19th century. And according to this version, which is in the Reader's Digest, the big massive book about folklore of the British Isles, a mermaid appeared and threatened to destroy 2 towns if they continued their work. Now, the problem with this particular version of the story is that the mere never reaches more than 1 metre deep, so it is quite difficult to know where a mermaid would live in a pool that shallow unless she travels along the streams that feed it, or she's very, very tiny. Either way, this legend is also attached to Blake Mere when locals wanted to see if it was as bottomless as claimed. And I can't help thinking that the Blake Mere version is a little bit more plausible, purely because of the fact that the depth just isn't there for the version around Aqualate Mere. And just in case you wanted any more inland mermaids, there's also a legend of a mermaid in Mermaid's Pool near Kinder Scout in the Peak District, and I quite like the fact that this one's literally just called Mermaid's Pool. Now, this particular mermaid, according to the legend, is supposed to appear at midnight at Easter, and if she likes the look of you, she'll make you immortal. If not, she'll drag you to your death in the pool. The rest of the year, the waters apparently provide healing powers for anyone who bathes in them. Other people say that you need to look into the water at sunrise on Easter Sunday to see the mermaid, and yet others more say that she's not actually a mermaid, but rather a nymph who lives on Kinder Scout, and she bathes in the pool every day, and you then have to see her on Easter Eve for immortality. So there's quite a lot of changeable folklore around this particular version, so I think it kind of sounds like you'd pretty much have to camp out from Easter Eve right through to the end of Easter Sunday, basically in a hope of actually seeing her. Now, we are going to take a bit of a detour from the Peak District to Dartmoor, because obviously Dartmoor's got quite a lot of strange tales and legends associated with it anyway, but it does add to its somewhat weird reputation because it has no natural lakes. Instead, it has quite a lot of pools, and Crazy Well Pool on the west of Dartmoor near Cranber Tor, it ended up attracting the legend that it was bottomless, and locals apparently tried using their church bells as a plumb line to test the depth, and they tied the ropes together, which apparently, if you believe the legend, gave them over 50 feet of rope and then basically put it into the pool, but apparently they still couldn't reach the bottom. Now, I must admit, I do quite like the fact that in the booklet that I read that in, which was, one of those little booklets that you buy in the local area, they did make the point that it would be interesting to know if the locals actually put the bells on the bottom of the ropes to give them something to sort of weigh them down, or if the ropes just essentially coiled up quietly at the bottom of the pool because there wasn't enough weight to them. Now, in reality, the extreme depth of Crazy Well Pool actually comes from its previous life as a shallow cast mine, and the remains of tin workings actually lie downhill from the pool, where an underground spring feeds the waters. But in 1844, the Plymouth Dock Water Company pumped the pool almost completely dry during a drought, and they discovered it was less than 5 metres deep at the deepest end, so it's not exactly bottomless as people had believed it to be. Now, other tales claim that the water level rises and falls to match the tides despite being nowhere near the sea, and that kind of thing obviously does add to its somewhat strange and unique reputation. But one of the other tales that you have, which is really quite strongly associated with this pool, is related by Tim Sandals on the legendary Dartmoor website. And according to him, the waters of Crazy Well Pool will actually announce the name of the next parishioner who will die. And what you need to do here is you need to look into the lake at midnight on Midsummer's Eve to see the person's face. Now, Sandals also relates that one year, 2 young men heard the tale and considered it to be rubbish. So the locals made a bet that they wouldn't go up to the lake on Midsummer's Eve to actually see if it was true. Not wanting to lose face, because obviously that's what tends to happen in these stories, the 2 lads went up there on a motorbike. Now, nobody knows if they actually heard or saw anything in the water, because they actually lost control of the bike and died in a crash. Whether they saw their own faces in the pool or not, obviously the legend can't tell us, because we don't know. But it's these kind of stories are quite interesting, how they're always tied to a particular time of year. And obviously, if you remember the Midsummer episode that we did last year, there's a lot around certain times of year being quite liminal, as it were, where things are more likely to happen then, because the supposed boundary between our world and the next becomes a little bit thinner. One of the issues I do have with this particular version is the fact that I'm pretty sure people do die the rest of the year, so I kind of feel like, how useful is it to know who the next person's going to die after Midsummer's Eve? But anyway, that is how the legend works. Crazy Well Pool also has probably one of the best names of a landmark as well, but that is Dartmoor for you. It's absolutely chock full of these kind of things. Now, we do have to think, in closing, why does lake folklore exist in the first place? And I am going to keep coming back to this idea of the cautionary tale, because I think that when you look at the strange creatures and other things like that, or the bottomless pools and everything, a lot of it kind of revolves around the danger aspect of deep water. Because much like river folklore, a lot of these legends do provide advice for the unwary. And let's be honest, if you said to someone, don't go near the lake because it's deep and it's dangerous, that's not going to keep a lot of people away, because a lot of people will just go, oh no, it's fine, that'll never happen to me. If on the other hand you were to say, beware the ghosts that lure you to your death, you're a little bit more likely to go, you know what, maybe I won't. And it's this idea of of ideas needing to have stickability before people will abide by them, and having a story attached to something again makes it far more memorable. So I do think that because no lakes are bottomless, and it's really quite unlikely that a witch is hiding in the depths of the lake ready to drown you, you're probably better off just going, that's going to be dangerous, because it could be super cold, or there could be things at the bottom that'll basically pull me under and then I won't be able to get free. But to be fair, it's also better to be safe than sorry. So that is a whistle-stop tour of some lake folklore. Obviously there's far more than that, and I was just trying to pick things that I thought might be quite interesting as examples of folklore. And next week we are going to round up our folklore survey of watery things with waterfalls. So we'll be having a look at like Iceland and Italy and Lebanon, and also the UK. In the meantime, if you are listening to this on Saturday, we are having the Rural Gothic Vernal Equinox event today, which is 7 talks, 1 day. £7.50 will get you a ticket for all of them. If you can't make a talk or it ends too late, it's fine. You will get video replays of the talks. We're going to have some absolutely cracking presentations. We're going to have Welsh Gothic. We're going to have ghosts in the 17th century. We've got lesbian vampires. It's going to be awesome. So if you are interested in finding out what the talks are about, or indeed booking your ticket, I have put the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this after Saturday and you think, ooh, that would have been interesting, you will still be able to purchase the replays as well, and then you'll just be able to watch them after the fact. So it's going to be available to purchase one way or the other, but it would be lovely if you came along live, because they're always quite a laugh. So I will be hanging out with the Rural Gothic crew from 3 p.m. today. That's obviously British time, and it will be lovely to see some of you there as well, because they are always quite a lot of fun. But in the meantime, I will offer you a very happy spring equinox, and I hope it's a good one, whatever it is that you end up doing. And I will see you next week for our final watery episode of Fabulous Folklore. Cheerio. Well, thank you for listening, and thanks for visiting Fabulous Folklore. I hope you enjoyed your stay. If you did, why not consider subscribing in your podcast app of choice? If you enjoy the show, why not leave me a review and help other listeners to find it as well? And if you'd like bonus exclusive episodes of the podcast, then why not support me on Patreon? It does help me to keep the show going, and it means that you get a little bit extra every month as well. And you can find all of the necessary links in the show notes below. So without any further ado, I will bid you adieu, and I hope that you have safe travels wherever you're going on to next.